everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So before we get into the real presentation, we're going to go over some bookkeeping items. All right. So how to view captions and subtitles in Zoom. You're going to click and show the captions, which is represented by the CC. Click and speak the speaking language you would like, and then select, and then there's also will be closed captioning and non-English translations available on YouTube after the meeting. How to use the Zoom Q&A. Select the Q&A tool at the bottom of the Zoom webinar, and then the Q&A window will open as seen on the right here. Please type in your question in the text box and click enter. If you are an audio participant, dial *9 to raise and lower your hand, please. This is also a question and answer session will be at the end of the presentation. We are still receiving questions and answers, or we will be receiving questions and comments after the session. So please, you can use the email at info.nhhsrail.com, by the phone number that's on the screen, or in the Zoom chat I just went over. We will also be receiving additional comments on the NHHS Rail website shown here at the bottom. Please note the comment period is open through October 18th, 2023. So now we're going to go over Title VI. Title VI, know your civil rights. No person shall, on basis of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participating or subject to discrimination in the development of this project. There is a voluntary post-meeting survey, seen on this link, as well as additional civil rights information on this additional link. A recording of this meeting will be posted to YouTube after the event. And closed captioning, including, just one moment. And
we love hybrid.
Closed captioning, including non-English translation options, are available on Zoom and YouTube. I'm going to hold up these slides for a minute. These are our notice to the public for those who are interested in reading this information. Additional translations. All right. Before we get into introductions, I would like to thank the town of Enfield for hosting this public information meeting. I'd also like to take this opportunity to recognize any public official in the audience and give them an opportunity to speak. Do I have any? No.
I'm good.
You're good? Okay.
I'm here to listen.
Okay, great. Introductions. So myself, Rich Bertoli, I am the principal engineer for the transportation unit, principal engineer in the transit facilities design unit. And also with me is the project engineer for the project, Julianne Chapman, Zach Garino from Rights Away, and Mark McMillan and Kevin Fleming from our Office of Environmental Planning.
Kevin Griffa.
And Kevin Griffa, our planning director. And then joining us via Zoom is Mark McMillan. All In addition to the CONDOT representatives, we have representing the program management team and our design team, we have Rob Urigian with WSP, the program manager. Marla Engel, the environmental task manager, also with WSP. David Tudrin, our station designer with Micro Baker International. Aaron Foster, our civil and track design with H&TB Corporation. Dave Miroslaw, structural design with H.W. Lochner. And Mike Kolostik with SDV representing traffic. All right. And from here, I'm going to let Rob go over the program.
Thanks, Rich. So as Rich said, I'm Rob Urigian with WSP. We're program manager for the department, supporting the department on the program. The program, I'm going to give you a little background on the program in general before we get into the details of the station project itself. The program was initiated in 2010 with a goal of increasing what was then 6 round-trip Amtrak trains a day to 17. To 25 in 2023. In a Tier 1 NEPA process was completed through an EIE for the entire 62-mile corridor, which resulted in a FONSI in 2012. At the same time, a Tier 2 NEPA process was completed concurrently, which addressed the following improvements. 26 miles of double track from New Haven to Windsor, 3 new stations in Berlin, Meriden, and Wallingford, bridge and culvert replacements and upgrades along the line, and the colors that you can see here from the green at the bottom of the screen through the brown, and then the green again, and then that lavender color up to Windsor. That was the stretch of the improvements that I described were along that stretch. Let me go back, I'm sorry. Current let me get this straight. Current program projects include the construction of a Windsor Lock Station, which you can see in blue up at the top of the screen, and the Enfield Station, which we're in design and which is the subject of the meeting today. The program achieved a major milestone in 2018 when we launched the new Hartford Line service, which increased trips from that 6 number that I talked to you about, 6 round-trip trains, to 17, to approximately 17 today. So that's the program overview. I'll turn it back to Rich for details on Enfield.
Rob had a great picture of.
Sorry.
It's okay. Of the ribbon cutting at the event in 2018. Sorry. All right. So the purpose of this project is to provide a safe, reliable, convenient alternative to automobile travel from Enfield to Hartford, New Haven, Springfield, and other cities such as New York, Boston via rail connections. Other benefits include some increased frequency for non-automobile, as well as reduced vehicle dependency and emissions. So here's an aerial of the entire project. This image is oriented with, from left to right is the northern direction. So the project is made up of 3 major project elements. First is the new station site, which will include a high-level platform, passenger waiting area, and parking, which Mr. Tujan will go over in greater detail. Secondly, to install the station on the east side of the Amtrak Railroad right-of-way, approximately 4,000 feet of railroad track will need to be realigned, which is shown here in orange. In addition to the track work, there will be work at Asnuntuck and Main Street Railroad bridges that Mr. Miroslav and I will go over in later in the presentation. Lastly, shown in green is the roadway work that will be done to support the work at the 2 railroad bridges. I'd also like to note that there is no anticipated total property acquisitions as part of this project. Mr. Tujan will go over the primary partial property acquisitions associated with the station itself when he goes over the station site. Before we go over the new station, I'd like to take this opportunity to look at some great pictures we found for historical context of this station. So up in the top left corner, you see the pre 1901 Thompsonville station, wood, and then you go to 1967, we get the brick station, we have the double track, to 1980 when we're running the self-propelled passenger trains on the line in 1980s prior to the second track being removed, and then where we are today with the station no longer there and only a single track. So I'm going to now turn it over to Mr. Tudrin to go over the new station. There you go.
Thank you, Rich. Again, my name is David Tudrin with Michael Baker International. I'm the architect of record and the project manager for the station's design team, consultant hired by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. The slide you see and the slides that Rich showed, just to orient you properly, in all cases for my presentation, the north is to the right, Connecticut River up. And this is the station configuration as we have it today in the design phase that we're in, which is just past the 30% completion. So I was hoping to have a pointer here, but as you can see, the site layout starts with Main Street, which is on the left-hand side of the drawing. We have easy access to commuter parking lots, one of which is to the left side along Main Street. That we call, I think it's Lot 2. And as you were to hug the edge of Bigelow Commons coming up towards the station, turn up north towards where you see the roundabout, that parking lot is also a commuter parking lot. So 2 commuter parking lots, one along Main, one adjacent to the Bigelow Commons property, totaling around 81 spaces. That drive lane that I've described includes a local bus access point for Enfield's Magic Carpet Bus, which the buses and anyone dropping passengers off at the station would proceed along the edge of the property northerly towards that roundabout, turn around and come back so they could properly drop off passengers on the platform side of the station. As I said, there's a kiss and ride. In essence, an expedited transit stop for private occupant vehicles to drop people off at the station for the station use. There's a commuter parking entry and exit gates because this is a fare collection system for the DOT. We provide covered bicycle parking near the station entry point, and we have we have a mandate to have at least 20% of the commuter lot station parking as electric vehicle charging stations. So in this case, 17 spaces, including accessible spaces, will have that charging station opportunity. We do have at the very far edge, it's in blue, just before you get to the roundabout, there's a station utility building of about 900 square feet, which will house the utilities for the station, which I'll describe next. This is an aerial view, and just to orient you again, you're sort of looking to the north. This would be sort of just south of Main Street. Freshwater Brook would sort of be underneath this image, looking towards the edge of Bigelow Commons and the station. So you can see the access point off of Main Street, turning upwards towards the station waiting area and platforms to the left of that drive lane. So the station amenities in themselves, 350-foot platform, sized to match the Connecticut CT rail passenger trains for platform boarding. Configuration and amenities, if you've been to some of the CT rail stations along the Hartford line, similar to Berlin, Meriden, Wallingford, the smaller 50-foot plus or minus platform at Windsor, only in this case it's with a single-sided passenger boarding and alighting opportunity for passengers only on track 2. The station itself consists of heated platforms, heated adjacent ramps and stairs to melt the snow in the winter months, similar to the other stations along the Hartford line, platform canopies, windscreens, and a roughly 550 square foot waiting area near the drop-off area with seating. It will provide real-time passenger displays, train ticket vending machines, covered stairs and ramps to the platform, and the design does permit the opportunity for a Main Street underpass, which would occur on the far left of the screen to enable passengers to cross the tracks if the department or others were to determine the need for a second platform in the future on the opposite side. The station site will include partial property acquisitions, as Rich indicated, for the development of commuter parking within the existing Bigelow Commons Northland Development property site, as well as a portion of town lands between Freshwater Brook and Main Street for additional commuter parking spaces along Main. Generally, the station, uses the same amenities, as I said, of the rest of the Hartford line. Bright, well-lit platforms, of course, and perimeter sidewalks, as well as the parking areas, of course. The lighting uses dark sky compliant full cutoff fixtures to prevent light trespass. There's closed circuit television cameras and blue light phones, emergency phones within the station. And there's an emergency generator for backup power operations in the event of an emergency. So this is an architectural view. Again, we're not too far along in the design phase, but we've come up with what essentially is the entrance to the station. The architectural character here includes something of an entry portal where passengers would enter to proceed upwards towards the platform, which is set above the sidewalk level by approximately 6 feet. It's meant to be welcoming, well lit. The roof system is configured in case we decided to go with a potential solar photovoltaic array south facing. In the design for the architecture is made to emulate some of the architectural character that exists today at the Bigelow Commons and other Thompsonville buildings with brick masonry, glass, and steel. We think it maintains the character of the other Connecticut CT Rail Hartford Line stations as well, with additional well-lit and bright and welcoming entry portal as I described. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Dave Marislaw, who's going to talk about the Main Street Bridge design.
So here's a photo of the existing bridge. The existing bridge is being replaced to provide sidewalks on both sides of Main Street, to increase the minimum vertical clearance, to support 2 tracks of the Hartford line, and to allow for future platform expansion. The existing structure was built in 1894. The existing abutments consist of brownstone masonry, and Main Street at the bridge consists of 2 approximately 12-foot wide lanes and a 6-foot sidewalk along the southern abutment. In 1995, a rehabilitation project came through that replaced the existing steel superstructure that supported 2 tracks with a single-track superstructure consisting of concrete. And here's an image of the proposed bridge. So the proposed structure will accommodate sidewalks on both sides of the roadway, a 5.5-foot sidewalk along the southern abutment, and an 8-foot sidewalk along the northern abutment. The minimum vertical clearance will be increased from 12 foot 9 inches to 13 foot 9 inches, an increase of 1 foot. And the proposed structure will support 2 tracks. The existing abutments will consist of reinforced concrete. They're going to be pile supported, and the sidewalk along the northern abutment is going to be elevated to provide for continuity between the station and future platforms on the east side. Here's an image of the proposed superstructure. So with this project, the track 1 will be installed with the potential for future track 1 to go in the future. There's going to be walkways on either side of the structure to provide access to maintenance personnel and to support utilities. And now I'll hand it back to Rich.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about the existing circulation in Thompsonville. So right now there are two access roads from downtown Thompsonville to North and South River Road, west of the tracks. Like Dave said, the existing bridge at Main Street is 24 feet wide with one sidewalk. As Nantuck, the roadway is only 20 feet wide. There's no sidewalk through the tunnel. It's proceeding from east to west. You have a sharp curve with poor sight lines leading down to the tunnel. The tunnel is only 16 feet wide, 7.5 feet high, and there is a stop sign on either side requesting to honk the horn before entry. And then in between those two bridges, you have the South River Road Bridge over Freshwater, which is currently under construction and will be replaced with a wider bridge carrying two 12-foot travel lanes and a 5-foot sidewalk over Freshwater Brook. All right, let's talk about the existing traffic volumes on both Main Street and Nantuck. So both intersections coming to and from are all-way stop off of Pearl Street. The volumes are very low on both streets. You have 800 on Main Street and 200 on Nantuck. The existing delay at the intersections up on Pearl and North Main are roughly about 7 seconds, which is roughly the time it takes for somebody to take a complete stop and then look both ways and then proceed. Now let's talk about the condition of the Nantuck Bridge. The existing bridge at Nantuck Street consists of concrete-lined brick arch that is rated in serious condition. Prior to 2021, before the project covered up there was cracks, longitudinal cracks, as well as there was separation on the outside of the structure. The existing bridge shows acceptable ratings for the trains that currently run on the line, but but the bridge does not rate for modern design standards. As discussed earlier, the opening is substandard and not to current standards for a roadway bridge. The track geometry that was shown in the earlier slide in orange would require us to raise the track and realign the track in order to facilitate the station construction. Those geometry changes would increase the load on this specific structure. And due to the serious condition of the bridge, has been determined that the bridge would be eliminated. So let's talk about what that would look like with the elimination of that bridge. Like I said before, the Main Street Bridge would be widened. You'd have two sidewalks to improve travel lanes, as well as increased clearance for larger vehicles to get from the North Main and Pearl Street over to South River Road and North River Road. As Nantuck Street Tunnel would be permanently closed to vehicles and pedestrians. All traffic would be diverted to Main Street. So for most people who travel to the boat launch or to South River Road, you're looking at about a 300-foot change in distance. Although the traffic is in the residential, it's a low volume to be diverted to North Main, as most people are coming that are east of Nantuck are going east and not going west. On Main Street, though the volumes will be increased, it's still very low daily volume on Main Street. So approximately an increase of 200 to the 800 I shown previously to 1,000. All the operations are proposed to remain the same. All-way stops on Pearl and North Main, and an all-way stop at the boat launch and at the end of Main Street and South River Road. And those intersections would see a slight 1 second increase with that one increase in volumes. So now let's look at what you can expect at the end of Nantucket Street with the removal of the railroad bridge. Due to the limited number of residents and limited town right-of-way at the end of the street here, we're planning on constructing a K-turn paved area shown here in yellow. This would allow fire trucks or smaller vehicles the ability to turn around at the end of the street, which we feel is appropriate due to the distance between Cottage Green and the end of the street. There would be also a small property take, as shown in red here, to accommodate the widening needed to make sure the turnaround was functional. And with that, I'm going to go over our current project schedule. So we just completed 30% design, so this is early in the phase of our design, and that's why we're out in front of the public to, listen to comments, consider everybody's opinion. Following this meeting, we will be progressing with final design, which will take us through the summer of next year. After the summer of next year, we'll bid and award the work, and with construction starting in winter of 2025 on the railroad and Main Street bridge replacement. Later in 2025, you would start to see some work at the station proper. So in the area of Bigelow Commons, on Main Street, for some of the parking lots, and the station work would perform. With all of that wrapping up in 2027. Because we are lowering the roadway after the bridge has been replaced, we do have a little bit of a lag, and the Main Street roadway improvements will be completed in summer of 2027. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Zach to go over the department's right-of-way process.
Thanks, Rich. Good evening, everybody. My name is Zachary Garino, and I'm a project coordinator with the Department's Division of Rights-of-Way. Our office is responsible for acquiring the property rights needed for transportation projects. As mentioned in the presentation, this project will require the acquisition of property rights, so I'd like to give a brief overview of our acquisition process. Before I begin, I'd like to mention that the specific impacts are still being finalized and may change as the design progresses, and that any required property rights will be acquired in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes, Sections 13A, 73, and 13B, 36, as well as the Uniform Act. Oh, never switched the slide, sorry. There you go, again, the references for the statutes and the Uniform Act. The right-of-way acquisition process begins once the design has progressed to a development milestone and all the impacts have been determined. At this point, each affected property owner will receive a formal letter of intent to acquire from our office, along with a property map which depicts the exact property rights to be acquired. And on the screen here is an example of a property map that an owner would receive. It shows the proposed impacts to that property as well as existing conditions. Next, our office will determine the fair market value of those property rights that are depicted on the map, which will be used to establish an offer of just compensation. That offer will be sent out to the property owner in writing, and a right-of-way agent will be available to meet with the property owner and explain the project, go over the specific impacts to their property, and explain the state's offer. The property owner will be given a reasonable amount of time to consider the state's offer, typically 30 days, and enter in negotiations. When an agreement is reached, the department will prepare all the necessary paperwork to record the deed and property map on the town land records. However, and if agreement cannot be reached, in order to keep on schedule, the department may acquire the necessary property rights to its power of eminent domain. In that event, the state files a notice of condemnation in the Superior Court along with a monetary deposit and the amount of the state's offer. The owner would have 6 months from that date to file an appeal if they felt that the state's offer was inadequate. Whether or not the owner chooses to appeal, the money deposited in the court is available to be withdrawn by the owner. It's important to note that the state only acquires property rights that are needed for the project. If there are any questions specific to the right-of-way process, I can answer them after the presentation. And with that, I'm going to be handing over to Marla. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach. My name is Marla Engel. I'm with WSP, which is the program management consultant to the department for the entire New Haven, Hartford, Springfield program, and I am the environmental manager for that whole program. And I'm going to talk about something completely different from what you've been hearing. And it's a little complicated and take a little long time, so bear with me, okay? So I'm going to talk about the National Environmental Policy Act. This meeting kicks off that process, and that process offers additional opportunities to learn about and comment on the project. And we talk about NEPA, which is the acronym for that act. So it doesn't regulate any particular impact like wetlands or wildlife, but instead NEPA requires that federal agencies take a hard look at the decisions of the impacts of projects that they make decisions about before they make those decisions. So there are 3 federal agencies that have offered grants to help construct the Enfield Station project. So those agencies must comply with NEPA by looking at the impacts of their funding decisions. So these agencies are the Federal Railroad Administration, which I'll call the FRA, and that's the lead agency, so that's the one I'll talk about. They're taking the administrative lead because there are 3 agencies. The Federal Transit Administration and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. Okay, so there's 3 purposes or benefits of NEPA. First, as I said, it requires agencies to take a hard look at the impacts of their decisions before they make those decisions. The purpose of NEPA is also to involve the public in the decision-making process by sharing information and by providing opportunities to ask questions and make comments. And it also provides an opportunity to explore ways to avoid and minimize the impacts of the project. This is a very busy slide because it summarizes the whole NEPA process. So the first circle shows that FRA must ensure there's a good justification for the project that sort of offsets whatever impacts there are of the project, which in NEPA is identified as the purpose and need for the project. Rich talked about this earlier, that the purpose of the station is to provide a safe, reliable, and convenient alternative to automobile traffic. So that's the first circle. The second circle on the top row there is that NEPA requires considering reasonable alternatives for achieving that purpose. And that's to make sure that the proposed project is really the best way to avoid and minimize impacts while also achieving that purpose. You can see at the top there are blue and green triangles that are marked Tier 1 and Tier 2, which I'll explain a bit more in just a minute on the next slide. But briefly, Rob talked about the overall New Haven, Hartford, Springfield program, and he mentioned a EA process there, which is a NEPA process. So these first 2 things, the purpose and need and the alternatives, those were completed for the station project as part of the overall NEPA, the programmatic NEPA, the Tier 1 for the station, and that was resulted in an environmental assessment, which is the documentation. I'll talk about that in a little bit, for the overall program. And then the rest of the steps here are indicated as Tier 2, and those are what we're kicking off today, and those are the site-specific and analyzing the site-specific impacts of the Enfield Station project. So as indicated by the red arrow in the third circle, we're kicking off Tier 2 with this meeting and with the opportunity for you to ask questions and make comments about the project. So the last circle in the top row shows that after this meeting, the impacts of the station project will be evaluated, along with ways to avoid or minimize those impacts. I'll show in a few minutes what kind of impacts we evaluate, because I think it's probably more broad than you might expect. And then the first circle on the second row shows that the impact analysis gets reported in a document called an environmental assessment, or if I say an EA, you know that's what I mean, an environmental assessment. We have a lot of long terms with the word environmental in. So, and then in the bottom row in the middle, notices like the one for this meeting will go out letting you know that the EA is available for review and where to find it online or where to find paper copies at local libraries so you can review it. So the best way to make sure that you know when and where the environmental assessment is available for review is to sign up online on the project website, or sign up at this meeting at the table outside, because an email announcement will be sent out to everybody who provides an email. So the review period for the environmental assessment is 30 days. That will last 30 days to review and provide your comments on it. And then as shown in the final circle, after the review period and considering all the comments that were made during the review, the federal agencies, FRA, FTA, and HUD, will each make findings about the impacts, and they'll make their final decisions about the funding at that time. And Rob mentioned the word FONSI, and that's a finding of no significant impact. It doesn't mean there's no impacts. It means there's no significant impacts that need to be mitigated. And often there are impacts, but we include that mitigating or avoiding or minimizing them in the project. So with the project and those elements, there are no significant impacts left. Okay. So I mentioned that this is a tiered NEPA process. I think I hit the button. Okay. Uh-oh, might go too far. Okay, so tier 1 was the overall, the purpose of that was to look at the overall project, the whole 62 miles, all the stations, all the track improvements that were proposed, because it's really important to look at the total impacts of the project, right? Because what happens, you know, for the station or for the track, it kind of has an additive effect. And so that all of that programmatic big look was done in tier 1. And then as the individual projects are funded, including the Enfield station, a more detailed and updated look at the impacts is conducted in tier 2, which is what we're doing now for this project. And it also provides additional opportunities for public involvement on a more project-specific basis. So Connecticut also has a state-level process that's similar to NEPA. It's called the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA. And the Tier 1 NEPA analysis was combined with the SEPA analysis and reported in a joint document. So it was an environmental assessment, and it was also a SEPA environmental impact evaluation at that time. SEPA does not have a tiered process, so that was pretty much the end of the review and the process for the overall program and for all of the stations. And at that time, a SEPA record of decision, the decision the state made to go forward with the project, and a determination of adequacy that the documentation was adequate was made. And so that SEPA process is complete, and those determinations are still valid. So NEPA looks not just at impacts to land, air, and water. You think of environmental impacts as sort of wildlife and wetlands and water quality maybe, but also impacts to the human environment. So I'm not going to go through all these, but just to explain a few of them. We look at whether the construction would disturb hazardous materials, because that would be a public health hazard. And if there are hazardous materials that would be disturbed, then we have to deal with them in the construction in a way that's regulated by the state. And whether there are impacts to the historic district the project occurs in. There's a Bigelow, Hartford Mills Bigelow Common Historic District. It's not just the Bigelow Commons apartment complex, and most of the project occurs within that. So we look at how a station in this location could affect businesses and development in the surrounding area. Often that's a benefit, right? There's more people coming through, so that's a benefit, not necessarily an adverse impact. And then we look at potential noise impacts and traffic congestion, and Rich talked about the traffic. And then we also look at all the other impacts that are listed here. And if you have any questions about what they are, I'd be happy to answer them when we're finished here. So now let's talk about who participates in the NEPA process. Is this okay? So obviously the federal agencies have a role, as does the Connecticut Department of Transportation, which I'll refer to as the department. And you and your local officials and your local political leaders also have a role. Pretty much anybody that wants to has a role here. And the environmental resource agencies like the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, they also provide input on the resources over which they have jurisdiction. So that would be water quality, wetlands, wildlife for them, hazardous materials, those sort of things. So looking a little closer, oh, sorry, I think I skipped this one. Sorry, this is just a list of all of, sorry about that. Jumps faster than I thought. So the three federal agencies, as I said, they have overall responsibility for complying with NEPA, and the FRA is the administrative lead agency. And while they don't actually conduct the analysis, they delegate that to the department. The federal agencies are ultimately responsible for it because NEPA is a responsibility that they have as federal agencies. So they have to review and approve everything. And so there was a very detailed outline that was submitted to them that they approved. They looked at all the materials that we're presenting at this meeting, and they will review and approve all of the analysis that's done as part of this. So, and of course, each agency will then also make their final decision on funding the project. So they've committed the funds, but they can't actually hand them over until this process is done. Okay, so the department, the Connecticut Department of Transportation, they proposed the station project, so they're the project proponent or sponsor. They're responsible for providing the project design and the other information needed to evaluate the impact. So they hired all these people that are represented here, the firms, to do the design work for the different parts of the project. And the department conducts the analysis under the oversight of the FRA. And it does that by hiring all of us, the engineers, environmental scientists, and planners who have the technical and the logistical expertise to conduct the NEPA process, including putting together all this meeting. So my colleagues here have worked on that, and they are the ones that got all the advertising out for it. So these are basically the consultants are all the people other than Rich and Zach who have been presenting tonight. Okay, so then what is the role of everybody else, basically the general public? So there's basically two major opportunities to comment on the project and on the NEPA process. Now, before the analysis is started, you can comment on the impacts and the alternatives to be studied. And then the second opportunity is when the environmental assessment is completed, you can review and comment on the impact analysis. And the federal agencies will consider your comments in their decision-making process, and if necessary, they can require clarifications or more analysis to be done. So if issues are raised that are within the scope of NEPA, before the comment period is closed for this part of the process, then they'll be studied within the project. And then if substantive comments on the EA are made, comments about the analysis or the methodology, then those comments will be addressed as well. So I've given you a lot of information that's probably very unfamiliar to you. So this summary kind of provides a summary of the next steps, a slide. So as we said several times, comments submitted before October 18th will be considered in the environmental assessment. And then we'll be evaluating the impacts and preparing that environmental assessment, that documentation. Then in March of next year of 2024, the EA will become available for review and comments for a 30-day comment period, and that'll go into April. And then each agency will review the comments, they'll make their final funding decisions, and they'll issue their findings and decision in August of 2024.
Thank you, Marla. With that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much for being a patient audience. And now we're going to take questions. So prior to starting, I'm going to start in the audience first, and then we'll go to the online. And just as a reminder, online you can enter into the Zoom chat. Okay, so back in the gray was the first question, and we have a mic for you so that they can hear you on the Zoom.
So could you just elaborate more on the property that you're looking to take and whether or not it's just are homes involved, or can you just get into a little bit more detail on what you're looking to do?
Like Zach said, this is still early in the project, but there are no acquisitions of homes. So we are looking to take part of Bigelow Commons existing parking and modify that to facilitate our parking, and then the other major primary parking or parcel acquisition is vacant land that is along Main Street there. When we go and review the track and finalize the track design, there may be some slight impacts at the back of the boundaries with the railroad, but until we get into that final design, we're not really going to know those impacts. And once we get those, that's when our right-of-way process begins, and they'll be reaching out to talk. But nobody's properties, or nobody's house.
That secondary parking lot, vacant land is owned by
Yes, and the vacant land is owned by the town. I believe over here was number 2, in blue.
How you doing? Thank you for the presentation. Ken Nelson, Enfield Town Council. I'm a little concerned about taking out that second bridge. Currently, we're using both bridges because we're repairing the bridge between them. So in 50 years, when we have to repair that bridge again, what happens? It seems to be we're minimizing the traffic down there, but nobody has brought up the fact that there is a proposal to do 100 apartments on South River Street, which is going to increase that traffic drastically. What happens if a train derails or there's a significant accident at that bridge and the people on North and South River Street can't get out?
So,
Are you referring to the tunnel
yes.
at Snutter Street? Yeah.
Yes. So it is a serious concern, number one. So the town has raised that concern to the state, and the state is evaluating that concern and will be discussing alternatives with both Amtrak and the fire life safety officials within the town. So before any final decisions or final design is completed, those conversations will be had. So the comment is not being ignored. It is being taken seriously, and we will be having additional discussions with the proper officials.
Thank you.
I get a microphone?
Yes.
I own property on North River Street. There are 4 residences there. There's a single family and there's 3 multifamilies. And there's 15 feet between our lawns and the railroad right-of-way. We own that property. We own North River Street. So as a result of that, the city doesn't really take care of that street very well because they don't own the street. But they do have the right-of-way, and they do collect taxes on the right-of-way. So it's kind of like a lost child. That whole neighborhood is like a lost child. Your right-of-way sends rocks on the road all the time. When they work on the tracks, the rocks roll down on the road. That's a hazardous situation. Cars hit them, they break the windows on my house. If they raise the tracks at that area, they're gonna have to go east because this will be impacted. So I wondered just how that's been addressed, how it's going to be addressed.
So this is the first time.
Also, it's not the first time I've raised the issue with the town. The town's well aware of it, but I'm glad to see all these engineers here because it is an engineering situation. Also, this lady's represents an issue here that's of concern to us also, which is increased noise, increased vibration, increased impact on the quality of life of those properties. There is probably, 1,000 feet of riverfront property there that's not really being utilized. And if you go south, there isn't very much public access to riverfront property. It's zoned for it. It's zoned for commercial residential. Maybe someday something will happen there. But I'd just like to see that taken into consideration somehow so that the existing properties aren't downgraded because of environmental issues caused by an increase of traffic noise and all that kind of stuff.
So let me first, your first comment, on the stone and the ballast and the raising of the track. So thank you very much for that comment. That is something that we can, as we receive that comment, we can look to as we continue our design, what's the appropriate slope for that stone. So for right now, for this project, since we are staying single track, the track is moving closer towards Bigelow Commons, and so it was moving further away from your property. However, there are plans in the future to double track, so that comment was important for us to consider as we continue down that further design to make sure that we are addressing that concern. So
Good.
So thank you for providing that comment.
All right.
On your second comment on town-related issues, unfortunately, we can't comment on stuff that's for another agency. So,
What about the environmental issues, the noise and all, and the vibration and all that kind of stuff?
I'm going to let Marla, do you?
We will be evaluating that. There's part of the requirements is to evaluate Sorry. We will be evaluating the noise and vibration impacts. This is my colleague that's working with me on that. There's a specific methodology that the Federal Railroad Administration requires that we look at noise and vibration impacts on what's called sensitive receptors, which is basically residences.
Yeah.
So we will be reporting on that. So be sure to take a look in the environmental assessment.
Because the train is as close as you are to my house.
Yeah, and so what we'll be looking at is the change, and so mostly what will be the impacts of what happens when the train stops and when it takes off, right? So there's some noise associated with that. So what's there now is there now, but we'll be looking. There will be train horns sounded briefly there when the train stops and goes through. So we will be looking at those impacts and the impacts specifically on the residents. We look at we evaluate it based on the distance you are from the horn.
All right, what are we supposed to do as residents? Keep an eye on the process or make our voices known at all times, or
Yeah, I would
write
say-
something up, or what?
Yep, I would say submit a comment that you want to make sure that the noise and vibration impacts are
Right.
evaluated and all the other things that you said here. I mean, we got it down, but also, it wouldn't hurt to send it in as well.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Excuse me, can we get your name?
Glenn Leeds.
Thank you. Fellow in the black shirt.
For me.
In the black shirt behind you, sir. Sorry.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm just a resident, Pat Thibodeau. When they closed this station in 1985 or so, the Hartford Courant reported that only about 5 people a day were using it. What projections do you have of the number of people who will use this specific station?
Thank you. Okay. So our original forecasts are approximately 300 passengers a day. So those have not been reevaluated since COVID, but that is what we are focused on and hopefully as, service starts to increase and improve with some other projects, that ridership can increase even more. Go in the gray shirt, and then we're going to take some comments from the Zoom panel.
Thank you. I just have a few questions. First is, within your presentation, you had a chart that stated completion is expected when you listed what was going to be completed is in the summer of 2027, but you said completion is also expected in fall of 2027. I'm wondering what work is being completed between that period of time. August 2024, you stated that the funding is expected to be announced. I'm curious if we can expect funding to change, is it locked in is what I'm inquiring about, if we can be screwed over by the government, which happens a lot, so I'm wondering about that. And is there intention for electrification of the line? Personally, I'm conscious of that it's a diesel line. That's concerning to me. Is there intention along the path to electrify that? And kind of branching off what Patrick said there, in my experience, in order for public transportation, specifically rail, to be successful in bedroom communities, it needs to exceed the efficiency of a car. So if it takes me 20 minutes to get to Hartford, but 30 minutes by rail, you can make the determination whether I'm going to take car or rail. That's not the case for people in Fairfield County who commute down to Grand Central. It's quicker to take Metro North or Amtrak. So is there intention for express lines or to increase efficiency of service to Hartford and Springfield? So those are kind of my questions. Thank you.
So the primary benefit is the commuter time. So if there's traffic on 91, whether you're going from Enfield to New Haven or up from Enfield up to Springfield, is really where we compete. We can't compete with normal person getting in their car and driving because we have to make additional stops and trains. But our goal is, like I said in the beginning, is to get some of those people that are commuting to and from work to get in, to take the train and save on that those trips. The funding, so we still have to get through NEPA, but the funding is committed from the federal government. So, and then this project is committed to by the state. So as far as funding, funding's not going to go away, but we do need to stay on schedule to make sure we get our NEPA completed. Like Marla was saying, why it was important to get any comments that you do have in by October 18th, so we can stay on schedule and make sure we keep that federal funding. I'm going to take some Zoom comments. I will be back.
The first comment and question is, one of the new Amtrak stations between Springfield, Massachusetts and Greenfield, Massachusetts was built with wood materials on one side of the tracks. To kick off service for the Enfield station and to keep station costs to a minimum, can a temporary wood material structure be built as well?
I'm going to have to take that comment into consideration. But as I noted before, we do have to move the track and address the railroad bridge before any station could open. But I will take that into consideration.
Great. The next question is from an individual who is a grad student and rides the Hartford line from Windsor to New Haven Union Station. They have seen a constant demand for train service while using it last year to present day, especially during the holiday time. They've seen bottleneck delays occur where it is single track. If service demand and bottleneck delays are already present, can a second track be constructed before the Enfield station breaks ground?
So not before, so because we have funding specifically for Enfield Station, we are proceeding with getting Enfield Station constructed and in service. We are aware of some of the bottlenecks and congestion caused by the single track, and like Rob was talking about, some of the future projects that we have in design is to add additional second track both in Enfield, Windsor Locks, Windsor, West Hartford, and Hartford that should help reduce some of those bottlenecks.
Do you want to take another one and then?
Yeah, one more, and then
One
we'll
more?
go back.
Okay. One of the renderings showed 2 minivans at the station. Are there plans to have CT Transit service the station with scheduled service? If yes, can you talk about what the plan is for CT Transit service to the station? Also, are there any plans for the PVTA to provide any service to this station from the location in Western Massachusetts?
They have to use a microphone or they won't be able to hear them out.
Transit Transit doesn't run there currently, so it would be up to.
There you go.
Can you hear me? It would be up to them whether they ran service. The design is being put together such that bus service can reach the station. As far as PVTA, Pioneer Valley Transit Authority, same answer goes to them as well. We're designing a facility that accommodates bus service, but we are not providing bus service specifically as part of this project.
All right. So this fellow in the plaid who's been waiting patiently.
Thanks. My name is Jack Hartley, 19 Alderman Road, Enfield. Referring to this gentleman that lives on North River Street, excuse me. I'm originally a native of South River Street. You propose moving the railroad track to the east. Is that correct? And how many feet?
15 feet.
50 feet.
15. 1-5.
15 feet.
Yes,
And this rail platform is going to be on the east side of that track.
that's correct.
And you're going to double track that.
Not under this project.
Oh, the rail platform will be there on a single track system.
That's correct.
So in other words, you double track it, you got to build another platform.
That's correct. That would be
Have
part of
some
the.
access back and forth, either overhead or underneath.
It would be underneath, and that's why we're replacing the Main Street Bridge, is to make it larger to allow that future connection between the two platforms.
Okay, my other gripe is, can you show me the picture you had on here of the railroad station? Yeah, you just won't buy it. Isn't that it?
Yeah.
What's wrong with that picture?
Doesn't say Thompsonville.
What's wrong with that picture?
Doesn't say Thompsonville.
Correct. It's Thompsonville, not Enfield. That rail line was built, extended from Hartford to Springfield in 1854. And it was a Thompsonville station established shortly thereafter. I don't remember it because I wasn't here. But it's been there in timetables with the New York, New Haven, and Hartford, Conrail, Penn Central, and Amtrak, Thompsonville Railroad Station. I'd like to know who gave the authority to change the name? Where did that come from? And how's it gonna fly?
Well, I'll take, that into consideration, and I will pass that up.
Could I see you raise of hands here? Where's Thompsonville? Put your hand up. You want a Thompsonville station? Huh? Well, you saw a couple anyway. Okay. You know where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. All right. Ma'am?
Mary Ann Turner, I have a couple questions. Oops, I should know better. You had some horn issues in Windsor, and I'd like you to explain how you fixed that. And I'm curious about the 300 ridership. Are you talking about from Springfield to Hartford? There's going to be 300? Because I don't think you're going to get 300 stepping on the train in Enfield.
On and offs.
On and offs. Okay. And I was curious about how long each department, since there seems to be a lot of you, to review all the parts that all of you keep doing to make sure that we hit the dates so everybody can say they're okay with it. It just seems like a lot of departments and a lot of oversight. So I'm just curious, will you actually hit the dates because of all of them?
Okay. So on the departments, we have different. The department is broke up into specialized units that's are experts in their respective field.
If you don't hold the microphone to your face, the folks at home can't hear you.
Sorry. So the department is broken up into units with respective expertise to make sure that, specifically like the NEPA, we make sure that we follow all of our duties and responsibilities as the Department of Transportation. So that our process has been what we do to meet our requirements, both by our federal partners as well as any state regulations.
What about the horn issues in Windsor?
So are you talking about at the grade crossings specifically? Sorry.
They built a lot of apartments over in Windsor. And because of that, they have a lot more residents, which someday we may have too. And they had a real issue with the horns. And I think you need horns with trains and so they don't get run over. But I know you folks had to do something to mitigate that. So it's just something to keep in mind in our house too. And while I'm at it, when is Windsor Lock supposed to be done?
So we're looking to have Windsor Locks in service in the fall of 2025. As far as the horns, we studied. So the horns specifically in Windsor have additional problems because that station is located right next to a grade crossing. The railroad operation requires additional horn blowing every time they go through the grade crossing. So because of those requirements, the horn noise there is much higher than at a station where there are no grade crossings. So
We don't.
yeah.
Okay.
We still, like Marla said, the operator of the train will blow the horn to, if there's people standing too close to the tracks or for safety reasons, he's required to make sure that he's operating safely. So that's why the use of the horn. Yeah.
The horns at grade crossings have to be blown from a quarter mile before, so they're really long. But the horn at the station is 2 toots. It's like beep beep, and they're less than a second each. So that's the pretty big difference. It's the grade crossings that are the really big problems.
Thank you.
Fellow in blue.
One more question about the bridge. You mentioned Asnuntuck and North Main, but you didn't mention the brook, Freshwater Brook. How are you addressing that bridge? And you have 3 bridges right in a row. Wouldn't it make sense just to make one big bridge and keep both those open?
Again, everything we look at and proceed with has cost in mind. So that's a consideration we can look into. But how we are addressing in this project, Freshwater Brook, the railroad over Freshwater Brook, there'll be retaining walls over that culvert that protect the additional sloping from that track raise from going down into the Freshwater Brook.
So you're not replacing that?
We are not replacing that. But the type of wall we're using does allow for a future replacement if and when that structure needs to be replaced. All right, let's go to some online questions.
This question is regarding the brownfield near Bigelow Commons. What are the plans to remove, if any, the brownfield entirely?
So that is not part of this project or is part of this project. So outside of this project, if that gets addressed either by the town or another state agency, that's how it would be addressed.
Next question is, what is the amount of the project cost for the construction of the Main Street Bridge that is owned by Amtrak? Will Amtrak be providing the cost to replace this bridge?
So I'm gonna, on the Amtrak, the cost of the Amtrak bridge, Amtrak will not be providing funds to assist with that. I don't know, Dave, can you answer that question or no? Okay, so we will log that question and get back to you on the cost of the bridge.
Great. The next question is, can you talk about how you determined that this station required 81 parking spaces, and if there is land available for additional parking at the station at some point in the future?
So the 81 spaces were something that the department's doing as we move forward with some of our stations. So it is a requirement that we've set internally. As far as we have looked at other sites, and if some of those other brownfield sites get redeveloped, there could be a partnership to additional parking there as well. The department always keeps, working with the towns and everybody and all parties that are going to be surrounding that station for different opportunities to increase parking. But the initial is to get the 80, and then as the ridership increases, we look for other opportunities.
The next question, has a signage and wayfinding consultant been engaged?
Okay, thank you. The Michael Baker team has designed over the last year, last decade, about 130 transit stations around the country, and we have our own internal wayfinding team to provide robust signage for passengers, transferring between vehicles, between intermodal systems, between parking spaces, and onto the platforms.
Thank you, Dave.
I have a couple more. Do we have any? Do you want to switch?
Do we have
back?
any more in the audience? All right, let's take the fellow in the red shirt.
Yeah, I've got a question on the safety standpoint during construction, especially the North Main Street Bridge. Have they taken into consideration the effect on response time for fire, police, and EMS to respond to anything east of the track? How that's going to affect that?
So, yes. So, like I said before, any stage construction that we developed, again, we're in the early phases of the project, any stage construction that impedes any access will be coordinated with the town officials and determined whether there's any mitigations or anything that we can do to make sure that that risk to the residents to the west side of the track are addressed. Okay.
Okay. Are there any plans that you can speak about for the transit-oriented development at or near this station?
That's not part of the project. Again, sorry.
And then the next question is this the only public meeting for this CT-DOT project, or will there be future meetings for the public to have input?
There is not any additional public meetings. But like Marla pointed out, once the EA comes out, there is additional time, additional forum for comment, as well as, as our design process goes through, we work with the town. So if you have additional comments or want additional feedback, please contact the town officials.
Or you can put comments on the website at any time.
Yes, I'm sorry. We also take comments on our program website at any time, and we'll provide a response. Oh, sorry. Oh, let's go back to that. Quite a few slides. So, right there at info@nhhsrail.com. Is there any more questions?
No more questions, just a couple of comments that we have logged.
Okay.
I'm Tim Smith, and I grew up in Enfield, and for the last 40 years I have an apartment in New York, and I'm back and forth all the time because now my family house is my house. So within the last 10 years. So I get the train in Windsor Locks, and from where I live in town, I'm there in 7 minutes. I'm there in no time to get the train. But it gets to be a lot. And I'm very happy to hear that things are moving along in terms of the Enfield station. Because I was disappointed many years ago that it was torn down. So that's all I have to say at the moment.
Thank you for your comment.
Hi there, Chris D'Antonio. I did just want to second the comment about the electrification. That is something I would hope to see in my lifetime. I don't think that's a stretch, but just as a comment, like any work that's being done on this line should take that into account from an engineering standpoint. I would hope so. As far as the question goes, how does this project stand? If you can speak a little more to the history of it, right? We've talked about this for several years now, since the start of the Hartford line, and then kind of for the past couple of years, it's always been pushed back a year. So what happened to everything that's happened up to this point? What's changed? It doesn't, and right, yeah. So what's the differences, and just speak to the history, please.
Yeah. So on the electrification, even though this line's not currently electrified, when we do design, whether it be the track, the bridge, or another bridge that goes over, we take that into consideration now. So, so those are a factor. It's just not part of this project, and whether the state decides to do that later, that at a later point. Yeah.
I know that didn't really get addressed earlier. As far as electrification is concerned, the line needs to be double tracked from New Haven to Springfield. And until that happens, we won't we won't electrify the line. So that means replacing the Connecticut River Bridge in Windsor, doing the station work in Hartford, replacing that entire viaduct, which are both Amtrak responsibilities for investment right now. So as Rich says, everything we've done in the program and we will do in the program does not preclude electrification in the future. But as far as a plan for it to be electrified, first of all, it's Amtrak-owned line. And secondly, there's those major improvements that need to happen that are being planned by Amtrak. So the comment about in your lifetime, I might take the over on that one.
Yeah. Oh, I just hit the wrong button. Thank you. And to talk to why it's taken this long, you know, with many of our projects that we're still trying to advance, it's support for funding and getting funding either from federal partners or internally. So, which is really great about this project is we have a lot of support from federal agencies that Marla talked about, and that's why we're proceeding as quickly as we can to get this into construction and to get it into service for you all. Oh, here we go. So I don't know, Rob, if you want to talk a little bit more to that, or.
You kind of asked what had been done, and so this, if you look on the website, you can get a little more information, but this is sort of shows what's been done along. There's parts of the track that has been double tracked, and it's just, as Rich said, it's just a matter of funding. So, but you can see that kind of starting from the south end, it's been double tracked, but it's not exactly sequential there. And then I think the stations that existed were upgraded first, right? Because those were stations where there was a lot of ridership. I think the decisions are made based on both ridership and the funding comes when there's ridership. It's easier to get funding when there's already ridership there. So I think that kind of sets the priorities on where it's all about money when the money comes.
Thank you, Marla. All right, any other questions? Yes.
My name's Terry Masterson, and my question to support the comment supporting electrification would be, are there plans for CT Rail to purchase engines that are cleaner, like the Siemens engines that we see in New Jersey Transit that are diesel to electric? That might be a cleaner, affordable, quicker solution than the idea that electrification could take a very, very long time, if at all, to go up the line.
Unfortunately, our Office of Rails, who is responsible for that equipment, is not at this meeting. But if you submit that question by email, we can provide a response, because they are looking at those type of things.
I put it out as a positive way of solving a problem.
So those things are being investigated, and again, funding when they can buy the equipment. But we do have an aging diesel fleet, so that is being reviewed and being studied.
Thank you, Rich. I have concerns about when the tracks are doubled and this station is only accommodating one side of the route, and customers will have to cross the tracks. And you mentioned they would go under the North Main Street Bridge and go quite a ways out of their way to get to the other side. I've seen several stations in the I-95 corridor with crossovers that are ADA compliant, and in my picture of the terrain around this station, it's going to be quite difficult to make it ADA with your lowering the clearance of the bridge, and so I assume it's going to be done by excavating more than raising the track, and for someone to make that path in bad weather and go back up the hill to get to the other side to the platform. So I like what I see for the single track, but it doesn't seem it's built for the future.
So I'm going to put this up. And I don't know, Dave, you want to talk a little bit to that?
I appreciate that. We certainly always consider an overcrossing as a great opportunity to connect platforms. And in this case, what you see in the rendered view is I'll call it the phase one opportunity for the single track platform for boarding and alighting on both directions. The station configuration does not preempt any opportunities to make that connection to the other side. And in fact, looking at this opportunity that you've mentioned along Main Street where we're widening the sidewalk, any solution to connect the two platforms would include a covered walking area between the 2 points on either side of Main Street, elevators up and down from the platform to the Main Street undercrossing, I'll call it, stairways also covered. And we can look at the timing. Generally, the vertical distance and the stairway distances at this point in the platform would be negligible, probably not too much improvement or loss of timing between the two platforms once the full configuration is made.
Thank you, Dave. And to point out, the area that Dave's referencing is that if you see where the shrubs are just to the east, that kind of cutout there, I don't know, Rob, yeah, that is the space for those future facilities that would allow us to make that vertical change and make that connection. It's almost like a reverse up and over. It's just down and below, and like Dave explained. All right. Any other additional questions or comments? All right. Well, I just want to say thank you very much for all your comments. It gave us a lot to consider. And everybody have a good night.